minutes. Are there any additions, corrections to the minutes?
Move approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Okay, the 2018 meeting schedule.
So this is a required action item by our bylaws to publish the schedule before the year begins for all of our committees and the board meeting. And doesn't mean that there can't be changes during the year based on whatever might happen, but I think I really don't see any exceptions. It would typically be at the Wednesday before the board meeting at 9.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, do we need to approve this? Or
Move
just-
approval.
Yeah.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we're zipping right along here. Forward Pinellas funding agreement. Debbie,
Good
you're
morning.
usually sitting over there. I'm looking over.
I know, I'm talking to Henry, so I'm sitting over here, and
Yeah.
you're the CFO for today. How's that?
Do I have the pen?
No. But today's action item is one we have seen since at least 2005, and is for the approval of an agreement with our MPO, Forward Pinellas, for $80,000, which has remained unchanged for all these many years. It's to be used for transit planning here at PSTA. We actually use it for our transit planning salaries. So we are recommending the approval of the agreements for this 5305 money that comes from the federal government through the MPO to us for transit planning money for an amount of $80,000.
Okay, any questions? Yes, Mr. Johnson.
I appreciate getting any money from the MPO for this, but it's unchanged since 2005?
At least, yeah.
Is there funds not increasing?
We've asked, and they've declined to consider a higher amount.
Is this something I should vote against at the MPO?
Thanks for the.
Can you find out when it, can you look back before 2005?
It's always been 80,000
Does it come out of their
Federal funds.
out of the
federal funds? Okay.
Increase.
Yes, Commissioner Schulman.
So it appears it's 80% of the project cost of $100,000 to really get the $80,000. Do we know if that project cost has been $100,000 back to 2005?
That's only our match or for the money, right? I mean, the $80,000 just pays for certain activities that the planning staff does. So we draw down on that $80,000 for eligible projects until it is gone. So what usually happens is Heather puts her time, eligible projects at the beginning of the fiscal year on that, and then I put about half of my time on there. It usually lasts about
till August, September.
Yeah.
It does, it's spread out.
We spread it out, but if we had more, we would then put more of the planning department's time on grants and less of it on operations.
Do we actually know what amount of funding is over the course of the year expended on planning activities?
Oh,
You could develop an estimate. It's substantially more than $80,000.
Yeah, so I was just wondering if we put together a hard
Your
list,
entire budget.
if we could then maybe encourage them to up the ante somewhat. Do they ask for a laundry list of expenses and
yes.
okay.
I was just saying to Bill, I don't remember, you know, you asked me what their level of income on the federal dollars had been over that same period of time. I couldn't tell you. So I don't know if it's gone up, gone down, you know, stayed flat. I don't really know.
I mean, if ours is in general has gone up, I'm sure theirs has gone up.
Could be, but it might be good to find that out,
Mhm.
see what's reasonable.
Appreciate your efforts,
Yeah.
the MPO.
Mhm.
He always is a good representative of PSTA on our board.
Okay. All right, so under the circumstances, our choices are approve it or not approve it, right? Because we can't change the number.
Right.
All right, do I hear,
Why don't I move to approval subject to asking the MPO for a little more information?
For consideration of higher.
Okay,
I'll second.
all right, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you very much.
And we would assume, while following up on that subject to provision, that we would put that on the consent agenda from the board.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense, all right. Okay, bus replacement purchase. Henry,
Actually, I think because this involves dollars.
oh, I'm sorry, I
I'm
didn't
sitting
mean
next
to,
to
his
my
name
bus
was first,
buddy.
I didn't mean to slight you, Debbie.
Oh, no, we're in it together on this one.
We're all in it together.
We all are. Actually, speaking of the first action item and this action item, it's a happy new fiscal year for us here at PSTA.
Oh,
Hmm.
Happy New Year.
So happy new year.
We saw the balloons in the lobby.
Mhm.
do we sing?
What was the?
You bet.
Fireworks layer?
Well,
Happy
we've got something to show you later for that, but from last fiscal year. But one of the things I'd like to do is say thank you to the board as a whole and to this committee for getting the budget passed for both the capital and operating. And as you know, included in the approved budget and the CIP, we have 18 hybrid buses for fiscal 18 and 19, which is a continuation of what we have done for the last decade as far as bus purchases. Today, we have on our fleet 71 hybrid buses. And some of you may or may not know, we are part of a bus consortium with other transit agencies in Florida. That consortium contract ends in December of 18. And what the dollar amounts for buses will be going forward at this point, of course, then is uncertain. One of the things that we've been talking about over the last couple months at the board and committee meetings is that we can be able to lock in prices today on these buses if we do one single purchase order for Gillig for the 18 BAE hybrid buses. That will save us money. The combined budgets for fiscal 18 and 19 for hybrid buses is $15.8 million. What we've got, the board action in front of you today is for $13.2 million. So that is a positive variance of about $2.6 million.
How many buses is that all total?
18.
18 in total for the 2 years?
Total. And what we would do is we would stagger the delivery, put the order in today and stagger the delivery so it'll come in 9 and 18 and 9 in fiscal year ending 19. So what staff is requesting is an approval to do one PO to Gillig for 18 BAE hybrid buses, and that would be not to exceed $13.2 million.
Well, in the spirit of trying to, at least once in my life, vote yes on buses, on the bus picks that we do here, I would like to have two separate motions. One that combines the 2 years purchase. I think that's a great idea, and without regard to the type of bus, and then vote on the type of bus. Because I think it's important that, again, maybe you don't have that same savings, but I'd certainly like to consider.
Well, I appreciate that, and the board has, as part of the budget, has already made that decision. And we're now, as staff, acting on what the decision the board has made. And, you know, obviously, there'll be many opportunities as we go forward for different types of discussions. However, knowing the passion that you have for this, what we've included in the Granicus are the, some of these different items that were in there that will show, as we look going forward and try to balance our operating budget, that there are savings with buying hybrid on the operating side, because it costs a new diesel versus a new hybrid for operating and maintenance costs $6,833 more per bus. Now that comes out to $6,833 more per bus to maintain and operate a brand new diesel. So by going ahead and
Per bus per year.
per bus per year. So we'll be saving $61,000, roughly $500 a year by going on the operating side alone, by going with hybrid.
And when you have that set up so we can see the two scenarios.
Yes, and
right?
there's different scenarios in here with all diesel buses still buying the 9 and the 9.
Good.
What if we bought more diesel buses? Our operating deficit increases even more versus
But our
the
capital
hybrid, which
side
is the
goes,
best savings.
but our capital side goes up.
Right.
Yeah, it'd be nice to see that.
Mhm. And that is out in Granicus for you.
It is
And
now.
Can we talk about some of those attachments that
Sure.
that were with this?
What specifically do you want to talk about?
The attachments to the agenda item. The first one is a chart that shows by year of purchase the different bus types and the average cost per mile.
Yeah.
To start with, there's a reference hybrid BRT. What is BRT? It's not Bus and Rapid Transit.
It's just a BRT
That is, yeah, it's the style of bus, the silver buses that have the aerodynamic
Oh, okay.
style. It's just a name we use.
It's not really a BRT bus, but Gillig calls their package that those have BRT.
The information you said, is it in our finance committee stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's these.
Oh, these three things in
I
Buffalo.
think the first one is the one I'm looking
At
at.
the fleet cost? Gotcha.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And then on that chart, that first one, under average per mile by fleet, it seems that the diesel, the 35-foot diesel purchased in 2007, we should have been buying a whole lot more of those back in 2007 because it's the cheapest, 20 cents a mile.
To clarify this chart, this is a snapshot in time. The time frame for this chart and the data that's in it is only for January 2017 to July 2017. So it's not an entire per vehicle history, life to date cost per mile.
That was a diesel trolley though, right? Or did I read that?
It does say trolley, yes.
It's just a trolley package though, right?
Yeah.
What we use down on the beach.
And the two diesels themselves are in that 79 and 88 cents back in that time frame.
Yes, just for the
Yeah.
7 months that
That-
this chart.
That used the old transmission, I think, at that time.
Yes, those
Yeah.
are.
I mean, the trolley and the diesel bus, they're the same basic vehicle, they just put just basically an aesthetics package on it to make it
Oh.
look like a trolley.
Is that what 2007 was, or did we have that's what we've been buying in 2007, a different package?
Well, that 2007, it says 35 diesel trolley. That means it is a diesel bus, regular diesel Gillig bus, but it has the trolley look to it. Yeah, it's the ones that we use on the beach or some other name.
Okay, and then the last question I wrote down is, in the heading for that bottom chart, it says fluids not included. So, as I read this, it does not include the diesel fuel or the gas fuel for it. If you added the diesel fuel at the average usage per mile, how would those change? Would
It would.
the hybrids look better?
It would because
better mileage?
they get better fuel economy than the diesels.
And that is
Yeah.
where, when I was talking about the difference in the operating costs between buses, that cost difference in brand new diesel annual operating cost is $42,000 versus the hybrid electric at $35,167. So you're getting that savings.
Where are you looking at that? I'm sorry.
That I have, but it's
Okay.
embedded in here when you start looking at I feel like Vanna White, when you start looking at the operating costs and the bottom line, and we put that into these sheets so you can see the impact as you go forward on what the operations would be on that.
Is it safe to say that the new hybrids that are in place now are more cost-effective than the other ones, the series parallel discussion?
Yes, in terms of fuel economy.
That's kind of what I was getting at.
Yes, we're right.
And when did that transition occur? What year, do you know?
2016.
2016, so up until then, the efficiencies weren't as obvious.
The hybrids that we've been purchasing have been averaging over their lifespan of about 5.25 miles per gallon. The newer hybrids that came in 2016, we have seen them break 6 miles per gallon.
But they're using less gallons too, right?
Yes, we
Because
have
of the way
seen
it's set up.
We have seen a decrease in the number of gallons that we use this fiscal year.
Commissioner Scott?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So that I think you said 6,833 per bus per year. Is that all on the fuel side?
That is not just on the fuel side, but I believe the brand new diesels also have a lot more filter costs, et cetera, but I'll turn that to Henry.
There is a maintenance parts cost savings as well as the hybrids.
We're assuming, in terms of the maintenance cost per mile, a couple cents increase due to batteries and high voltage systems and accessories
On the diesel side?
for the
Hybrid.
hybrid side.
So is the maintenance side more on the hybrid or the diesel?
Yes, not by much, only about a couple cents. Where you see a lot of the savings on the hybrid electric side is the fact that it has much better fuel economy.
So the 6833 is mostly fuel?
Correct.
And we
Well, it'd be
have-
all fuel if the hybrid is a little bit more per mile
Yeah.
contained, so it would be all fuel, right?
And what we assumed was the $2 per gallon, which was much more reasonable, as we've talked
Right.
about in the past, yeah.
Right. Does that, I mean, as the hybrid goes down the road, literally through its life cycle, at some point we have to replace that $250,000 worth of parts that the diesel doesn't have, so are we capitalizing that?
We are, and we are using, that's one of the hybrid component piece that we have in the capital budget. We're using PSTA dollars to do that. As we talked about, we'll see significant savings over using any federal dollars to buy those parts, because you don't have those literally 24 pages
Right.
of different regulations you have to comply with.
But that 200, that's not in those numbers then?
Well, it's gonna be capitalized, it's kind of taken out of.
And we've actually
maintenance, the way I
included that.
understand it. It's gonna be
Yeah,
capitalized.
we actually
Hold on.
included that.
Okay, she said that it is included in this.
It's not included in the bus purchase prices.
I'm talking about the annual maintenance, if you
But
said
the
it's
annual
35
maintenance-
versus 42,000, 35 versus
That's
42.
included.
It's in the 35
Is
number.
that correct?
Yes.
Just so I'm not saying it.
Yes, we-
That's why I sit next to my bus buddy.
So I just want to make sure that I understand is that maintenance expense, that mid-life refurb of all of those parts, we're going to capitalize that and not have that in the operating budget?
That's correct.
So we're shifting dollars is essentially what we're doing.
I'm sorry, I thought I heard one thing, and then I just thought I heard something else. Explain it again to me.
So the maintenance of those, the replacement of those high-dollar parts are not going to be in the operating, it's going to come out of capital.
That is correct, but when we're taking a look at how much does it actually cost to maintain a bus, regardless of the source of funding, that's where we're saying the hybrids are cheaper because of the fuel economy, a little bit more expensive on the maintenance side. But overall, you're having a savings.
$7,000 a year, roughly, savings per bus. with all that capitalized items included in this comparative thing.
And again, that's correct? Okay.
So to use the same, if we continue that spectrum discussion of comparing operating costs as this new driver as opposed to the capital side, how does the electric buses stack up on
The
a?
electric buses are the most efficient, and they cost comparatively, the annual operating cost is $16,600.
$16,600. And, which, getting back to comments before about electric, once the electric technology is where it needs to be and prices actually start coming down a little bit, then it starts to make even more sense. Right now, you still have that capital maintenance trade-off.
Right.
And dependability and all that stuff, so I guess at some point you have to make that trade-off, and where do you make it? And I think you can still make an argument that if you look at that 5-year plan that we did 2 years ago, that showed, going off the cliff in 5 years, 2 years ago, and now it's still 5 years, if I'm not mistaken.
It will be out in 2022.
Which is,
That's the
which,
next-
yeah, but that's a big part of the equation is your bus purchase.
Right, so the more efficient buses that we buy, the better off we'll be on the operating side.
Right, and less good on the capital side.
But I can only use those capital dollars for buses, I can't use them for operating.
Understand.
Okay, Commissioner Scott?
Thanks, sir. So on the savings, making the advanced purchase, which I think is a great idea. So that's going to apply to the 2019 buses, right? Because the contract goes to the end of 18, so that would apply for the 9 buses in 19?
That would be correct, and we're buying greater volume buses than we otherwise would be as well, which helps.
So a $2.6 million savings divided by 9 buses is like almost $300,000 a piece.
It's 18 buses.
18 buses.
Do your math again, please.
Well, if the contract goes till the end of 18, then we already have that guaranteed price locked in?
Yeah, we would lock in today at the prices of $735,000, roughly a bus. And we've been seeing.
And it's still like 150, almost 150,000.
Yeah, about
which
$144,000 would be saving
seems
over
like,
the next.
I mean, if the savings is $5, I'm all for it, but that just seems like, buses go up 3 to 5% a year. They don't go
We've
up
been
that
seeing
much.
them go up 5 to 5.6% is most recent.
Mhm.
And with the consortium, we're anticipating that it probably would be more than that, more of a 10% increase. But definitely, as you said, locking in today
Right.
for what we can, we should.
Yeah, I agree with that. It just seems like a lot of savings to me for what we're buying. Just making that point. So we're going to buy 19 for 13.2 million. If we were buying diesel, and I understand the operating would be higher, how many could we get for the same?
25.
That's what I figured.
About
Just so we understand, we
Yeah.
understand the
Yeah, you
decision
would
that
be-
we're making.
You'd get, instead of buying 9, you would be able to get an additional 4 more, so it would be about 22 buses,
20
I can't remember, 24, 25.
25, somewhere in there.
for $13 million.
For 13 million with the savings, yes.
24.
So
Yeah.
24 versus 18 buses. So six more?
Yep. So on the reserve, just kind of looking at here, regardless of, what we do, what's our plan in 2022?
Oh, by 2022, we're going to find so many ways to save money on the operating side, as we continually do. I mean, there's just a lot of efficiencies always to be had that we're looking at, which is why we never, the staff works so hard at doing things. It's like, Henry, by investing money into the maintenance of the buses, we have less issues going down the road with them, no pun intended, going down the road with them. So there's gonna have to be a lot that we can do.
I mean, I get that, but that's kind of a bumper sticker. I mean, I think we need more of a plan that we're gonna save money.
Route efficiencies, which we'll be talking about today, if we continue down that road, that's where.
Well, on this chart, we've got to, in 19, 20, and 21, we've got to keep our expenses in line with the revenues. So the expenses need to come down from where they are up in the $80 million ranges down into the $70 million ranges that you see the revenues coming in at. And that will, every year compounds, the deficit in 2022 is compounded by those multiple year deficits. They add up. So every year that we balance the budget, basically almost pushes the deficit out. So we will, I mean, if expenses or forecasts go along with our, I believe, our conservative forecast for increases.
I have no doubt we're gonna find ways to balance the budget. I mean, that's not the point I'm making, it's just that, I mean, are we hoping for a Hail Mary from the federal government? I mean, if that's what our hope is, then we should just say that's what our hope is, but I mean.
No, I think it's cost savings, route efficiencies, you know, in the cost saving side, there's always, we're finding ways of, like I said, doing efficiencies. Our greatest cost is in our salaries and fringes.
Right. Yep.
What's
So
your,
if you can control those, you've controlled your budget.
what's your assumption for increases in fare box revenue and increases in property tax?
Well, we've included in there the decrease based on the
Right.
property tax.
Right.
And then
Homestead exemption.
the homestead exemption. So that's already included in there, because I'm presuming that will pass. And what was your other question? I'm sorry.
The property tax, the assessed valuation increase.
That was, I'll look to Michael,
It was the same as the county had in their projections, it was like between 3 and,
3 to 4%.
yeah, 3 to 4%.
And the revenue fares increases.
Well, we've actually, for next fiscal year, we brought it down more in line with what we figured this year would be, which was a decrease in next year's budget of about 1 million
Really, we've held it flat.
or something, and then held it flat. So that's assuming no fare increases and no,
And no
Revenue.
ridership increases. either.
Right.
No fair revenue.
revenue.
Mr. Scott?
So we have that big block of buses that's coming up. I think is it 46 buses that are 2006 model year? Which, so how long do we anticipate, because the way I see this, at the end of 2022, we don't have any money to buy buses anymore. So how long do we think we're going to have to operate those buses? And how are we going to continue to maintain them if we can't capitalize, if we don't have any capital?
Right, and the other thing is, I'm assuming in here is we are not successful in getting any discretionary funds,
Right.
which Cassandra has already proven that wrong. So, thank you,
It's my
Cassandra.
favorite game, is to give you money.
So by discretion, meaning federal grant dollars or?
So right now, this is all based on our formula fund, so the discretionary money that comes in will help to, like the $1 million that we just got, that will help to buy buses that can use other funds to then buy more hybrids or electrics or whatever.
That $42,000 number for the diesels, that's the new diesel buses that we're
Brand
getting
new
in.
diesel.
What are the existing ones, the ones that we were just asking about? What are they running that we're trying to, that big number that's coming, that 2006 year, whatever it is, 46 buses you just talked about?
Yeah.
What are they running per month? If these new ones are at $42,000 maintenance, right? What are the old ones?
Probably less, so less complex.
Well, if you look at the first chart, those pay range, well, the 34, 2006
What
deals.
chart are you looking at?
The first one, the Brian Scott one. The Brian Scott Memorial Analysis versus the Josh Schulman Memorial Analysis.
So the older ones are $1.04, that's the 2001?
Yeah, that's per mile, just the maintenance cost, does not include fuel. So,
And that would be, when compared to the new diesels, that would even be a greater.
yeah, you can kind of see that the slope goes kind of down, sort of. It's not perfect. Yeah, newer buses theoretically should cost less to maintain per mile than older ones. And the chart does generally have that trend.
And so I guess the point that really, that we've talked about as it relates to environmental, and I've talked about as it relates to this, is that with that greater difference, and if we can replace more old diesels quicker with new diesels, there's a realized savings there that we're not going to get if we go with the less number of buses that we buy, just from a budgetary standpoint. If we can buy 7 more buses, that replaces 7 of those bad buses, and we can start realizing that savings too.
But we perpetuated another 15 years of old technology.
Yeah, I mean, we're trying to transition here through a period of time before the technology is where we want it to be on the electric side. As I see it, this is kind of a transition period.
Where does the
There's that.
jump in?
Well, the maintenance cost too on that older equipment.
That's what we were just talking about when you stepped
In
out.
the environmental emissions, when did that kick in? Was it after the 2006 buses? Where-
The first generation started in 2008, and then there was a second generation in 2010, and then another one in 2013, and there was another one that just got passed for 2017. So there's been about 4 generations of emission reduction technology. So for intents and purposes, to answer your question, from 2008 on up is when the emissions kicked in.
I was just trying to address the question that
Yeah.
Commissioner Eggers is asking, when do we get the environmental benefit from the diesel bus
Right.
expand, increase?
So when can we get rid of those old diesels? How can we get rid of those old diesels faster from an environmental standpoint and from a maintenance cost saving standpoint?
Right, and
That's-
it's a tough balance,
Yeah,
because
it
the
is.
more diesels you're putting back into the fleet, the higher the operating costs, for which I have less resources to balance.
On
the
bus
budget.
for bus basis, correct.
Right, so you.
But that's offset by the capital cost.
Right, but I can, again, I have limited resources to balance the operating budget. I've got other resources I can't even bring over to help with that. So, right now, I think when we're looking at it, what I'm hearing today is everybody I've heard speak today is very on board with saving money by locking in prices similar to the
Yes.
fuel.
Mhm.
So I think that's good. The board has approved a budget, which gives staff our little marching orders to go ahead and implement, which,
I don't disagree there.
Okay.
You'll
So
continue
the
to hear me
board-
disagree, but I totally understand what
Okay.
your marching orders are different.
my marching orders is the board
The
of the
board
whole has
gives
said,
a
Debbie,
direction.
go ahead.
Correct.
Work with Henry, get with the Gillig, let's get it done.
But I do think that the issue that we're talking about right now is relevant when you're trying to paint the picture for the board. And that is that if you can buy 7 more buses for the same price in the capital side, okay, forget the operating, 7 more buses, and you take 7 bad buses off the road, you're realizing a savings in operating that has to be factored in too. It may not, because those additional 7 buses are gonna save you, I haven't heard the number yet, but it's way over $42,000 for an old diesel. Because I'm looking at it, what it costs an old diesel without gas
It is.
compared to what it is today. So that 42,000, I'm just making a number up, it's 49,000. again, whatever it is, I don't know, because nobody's told me that today, but that additional savings has to be factored in as well when you're trying to talk about overall operating savings in your fleet. I'm talking about operating now. So that's all I'm saying. The capital isn't any different because you're gonna spend the same amount of dollars on capital. You've just saved yourself money operating.
No,
As we replace those old buses, not on the first 9, or the,
Right.
I'm talking about the above and beyond what we
Right.
can purchase if we bought diesel. There is savings on the old, getting those old diesels off. Savings on maintenance, savings on the environment, more buses, more reliable buses on the road. And those are the things that we've been talking about as the trade-off. Again, it's a trade-off, and I just don't think that piece is shown enough as a comparative. That's all. So,
I would suggest that the reliability factor is not a relevant one. Our reliability is very, very excellent.
it certainly
So that's-
was 2 years ago, and somehow in the last 2 years, Commissioner, we have had a miraculous change in how our reliability has gone, so that we've gone from now 13-year buses, now we're expanded it, because our bus purchase program, if you remember it from 2 or 3 years ago, the numbers were much bigger than they are now. We've dropped those numbers dramatically down. The argument is they're more reliable, but we don't have the money to buy the other ones. That's the real driver. So when you're talking about that as a combined thing, it's both. It's more reliable buses. Newer ones are more reliable, period. So,
Commissioner Schulman, sorry, I didn't see your hand.
just different.
I'll start waiting. Just as a reminder, do you recall what was budgeted for bus purchases this year? Was it half of the 13.3, or was it a higher number?
We had budgeted
15.1.
15.8 between the 2
15
years. Between the 2
2.6
years,
plus
I think it was
13.3.
maybe 11 and 6, or what, it's 15.8 between the 2 years, I can't remember exactly.
Okay, and so that the 2.6 million just rolls forward as far as capital savings into future
So,
years?
yeah, it's just a positive variance to the budget.
Okay, so, couple questions. One, does it make sense to potentially use that 2.6 million to buy more buses at the cheaper prices? Whether they be the hybrid buses, or use that difference to pick up some more diesel buses to kind of accomplish both? Because I'm hearing both sides of the argument, and I definitely think that the faster transition and moving forward with the savings and the contract that's here makes sense. But if we have that budget and it'll save us operating costs by getting some of those older buses off faster, can we pick up 7 or 8 over the course of 2 years of a regular diesel and keep that transition moving using those savings?
We have to keep them for 12 years, is that right?
That's the minimum.
So what's 12 years ago from now?
2006, which are the buses we're talking about, at least as far as I'm hearing. I'm not an expert on the buses.
And we have 46 of those that are going to be aging out next year.
So even if we potentially use that to commit to buying them in 19 to replace the 6s, but I agree that there's an opportunity to continue to transition, which I think makes sense for the contract that we see. But can we be a little bit smarter in locking in some of the savings at today's current prices for future buses, whether they be hybrid or diesel?
We've got 71 hybrids. I think we've done a pretty good job of transitioning.
Well, transitioning is transitioning until it's completed. So until you get to 100%, you're still transitioning.
And
So
then,
I think
we'll be transitioning still to
Right,
electric.
right.
See,
No, no.
we're always in a state of transition, I guess.
Well, if things aren't changing, then they're staying the same, right?
Exactly.
So it just seems that we might be able to accomplish
little
both of
above.
those by using some of that savings. And I agree from what I've heard and read and personally know from experience, the costs go up. So can we use those savings to lock in, as opposed to just banking them for future years? Use those now at today's prices.
I think we're gonna have to check on that, because we don't
interesting
have
thought.
any approval from Gillig to buy. We asked them about a third year.
Mhm.
We could lock in for more than 2 years. They said no, plus their contract is ending. And then, I don't know. I don't know the answer if we could buy more than 18.
But you're right, to your point, that would have to be kind of a board decision that would take some of that savings that you're talking about, or the $2 million, and then let's try to get rid of some of those old buses quickly.
Well, and that's why I asked, because if the board's already approved a budget of 15.1 for bus purchases, you know,
But they've also kind of taken the position that they don't want to buy diesels anymore. So we have to revisit that for that incremental savings that we're talking about. that
Right.
We would hurry up and accelerate getting those things, help our operating cost, and continue making the transition. I think that's the point you brought up, and I think it's a good point. At least ought to be looked at.
Or instead of 18 hybrids, it could be 15.
Yeah, whatever. I think there's another balancing
Right.
thing that goes on there.
One other question I had was, which buses are being, if we went forward with the 18, which buses are being retired?
Good question.
There's footnotes for the
That's
ones that
what I
are
know.
already being retired, but I wasn't exactly sure which buses we're replacing. Is-
The remainder of the 2002 model fleet and a portion of the 2005s.
Okay.
It's not just the 06s, it was before that.
Oh, yeah.
So we still have 05s that would be. So I guess what I'm saying is, you know, with everything that's already planned and the new 18 buses, what are we left with? Say that we, you know, a year from now, we have all the new buses that we've already agreed to. What, how many 05s are left, and what's our plan to replace those?
A year from now, we should be looking at just a couple of 2005s left on the road, probably 2 or 3, and then mostly the fleet would consist from 2006 to present.
Okay. And is there a reason why keeping those 2 or 3 2005s, that we're keeping those? Because even if we said, and again, I don't know I realize there's different versions and lengths of the buses, but even if we use that savings to buy more hybrid, that would get us 4 more hybrids, which would replace all of the 05 fleet with the same dollar amount that the board's approved thus far. So is there a reason why we only went with 9 and 9? And that we're still going to have some of those 2005s around.
We would keep them on the road as long as our peak bus requirement dictated that. So the number of buses we need to put out on the road per day is dictated by the amount of service that we have on the street. So that's why we would keep them in service.
I guess what I'm wondering is, how do we get to 9 buses per year?
Debbie, a financial decision in order not to get in the same situation that we did 12 years ago with a huge earmark and getting 46 buses in 1 year, try to smooth it out over the period based on the availability of funds through 2022. Debbie, not Henry, came up
Right.
with 9. Now, what you're asking really questions is questions I've asked for the 6 years that I've been here. I've done these beautiful spreadsheets and smoothed it all out, and then sent it over to the maintenance department, and Henry and his fine people who are rock stars at making the buses run efficiently, and they do not follow it. They know the buses. You and I and my spreadsheets do not. They develop little affinities and love for maybe one of the 2005s that just works like a charm and never costs us any money, and he keeps it. Despite the board and me developing all these great spreadsheets and perfectly smoothed out fleet plans. It'll be 2022, and then I'll find out that they kept the 2005. Like, what? That didn't jive. So, keep going. Keep trying to get him to do it. I have given up on that. I mean, they do a really good job of maintaining the most efficient vehicles, and just like your cars, you know, it generally is the case that the older buses or cost more, or don't run as well as the newer buses, but there's always differences in that. And so that's why we still have some of those 2002s, because they just don't break down for whatever, I don't know why. But
Well, and I'll
and it's
concede,
good. I don't know. I mean, I've tried different management techniques, and I think it's just going to be, it's more of an art than an exact mathematical science.
and I can see, I don't know anything about buses. I barely know anything about my own car. And so I also realize it's not a calendar thing, right? It's not like, oh, this one's the next in line to go. I just wanted to make sure that we're again, knowing that prices are going to increase and being personally more concerned that prices will probably increase more than we think they will over the next 2, 3, 4 years. Can we use some of that? Is there a wish list? I don't care if it's an 06 bus. I don't care if it's a 9. I mean, there were other buses that we just retired.
Bad buses,
The frame wasn't holding up and it wasn't doing as well. So it doesn't matter to me which buses, as long as we're optimally getting as many buses as we can, while still transitioning to a better technology with a lower operating cost, because I realize the operating budget is the one that has the pressure in the short term, and the limitation to move from the capital to the operating side. So I just want to make sure we're maximizing that. And if there was a 3 2008 buses, these are really giving us trouble, or would make better sense based on their route to be in a hybrid versus a diesel. So I just want to make sure we're maximizing that.
And Henry, it's interesting that in that 06-07 timeframe, that maintenance cost is a little bit higher than the earlier ones. Is it the earlier diesels, is it just bad luck, or is kind of what we're talking about, or what is the, and it's not the overall cost because we don't know about fuel efficiency, but just the maintenance cost per mile. This seems to have gone up in, what year is that, 07? And yeah, 07's really spiked there a little bit, not spiked, but jumped up a little from.
So each of the diesel fleets has gone under a repower program to prolong their lifespan. So that's why you see kind of some anomalies in 09, the 209 fleets, because those are currently going under a repower plan. So the more, as we do that, their cost per mile goes up because we put more parts in. So what you're probably seeing is the 06 and the 07 fleet are the workhorse of the fleet. There's 46 of them. They also do the most mileage per year. So you may see some residual parts being used, carryover from overhaul program. The brunt of it is over. That's why you kind of see it low and then go up a little bit, and then you see it spike again in 09. That, and also combined, is that they are doing the most mileage in the fleet. I believe combined they're contributing almost 20% of the total annual mileage per year. So more mileage, more maintenance.
Got it. Thank you.
And those, when we repower those we capitalize that, right? Expense that, and those engines, those transmissions, those are capitalized, or those are?
For the 07s. Going forward on the hybrids, we're going to capitalize the hybrids.
And what are we doing currently now on the diesel? Is that capitalized?
And that's in your operating budget. Correct.
Now, if we were to purchase diesels in the future, would that be capitalized or operating?
It would depend on the cost of the part. How much is the engine and transmission?
Our repower program generally costs about $60,000 engine
Oh, we could do
transmission.
that as part of capital too.
So I guess what I'm going with is that savings of $68.33 per bus, does that include those mid-life repowers on the operating
It's
side?
just your
or on the
annual
capital
operating
side?
costs, so I don't know.
Our maintenance costs per mile do factor in mid-life overhauls.
I think, so on the capital side for both types of technology, or?
Right now, we just have in the budget for the hybrids.
So we're putting that on the operating side for anything other than hybrid.
To me, you want the cost savings per year, but averaged over the lifetime of the bus. So it includes the rebuilds that you're doing.
Right.
And the 6833, which is the diesel costs more than a hybrid per year, be in operating costs, not the fuel cost. That's what I think
No,
that number was, right?
That includes fuel.
Oh, it does include fuel?
Yeah, $2 a gallon.
That is a projected planning exercise on a new diesel versus a new hybrid, not tied to any of this Henry data on actual
Right.
expenses. That's a projection. theoretically, that does include, to try to be apples to apples, overhauls regardless of the technology in that number. But that's a planning thing. It doesn't factor in the savings that Commissioner Eggers is talking about, that the fact that the oldest buses in the fleet have a higher cost per mile, and they could be replaced with a newer, younger, a brand new bus that would have that $6,800 lower cost per mile type. That's not factored into that, of course.
I had a couple of questions
Okay, go ahead.
on these charts.
Yeah, then we gotta move
Just-
along here.
Yeah. On the
What else?
second page of the first attachment, it was diesel fleet LTD mileage versus design life mileage. What's LTD?
Life to date.
Like 2 days. And then in the 5-year projection sheet, the last projection, it doesn't say, is that the one where we're projecting buying hybrids all the way out?
I believe so.
It's the hybrid metrics. What are V80, hybrid V80?
Yes.
That just got left off the title. So if you're looking out, we can fund everything through 2021. Really, in all 3 of the scenarios, but we come up short in all 3 of them in 2022. That's because we run out of our operating reserve at the beginning of the year in 2022. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, go ahead, Commissioner Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. How much of the maintenance budget can we capitalize?
Probably your engines, your transmissions. What else?
Engines, transmissions, drive lines, anything new in the overhaul process, hybrid parts.
Well, that's the federal grants that come into our operating revenues, right?
Well,
Right.
here's what we used to do at PSTA. We used to get federal, even today, we take a portion of our formula funds that we get, so 5309 money, 5307 money, and we put that towards operations. We used to put it towards parts. And then I came in and kind of watched it a little bit, and I said, why are we putting it towards parts? Because then every little part that you buy, every nut, every bolt, everything that you're doing for preventative maintenance has to have every federal clause with it. So I said, let's not do that anymore, let's put it all towards labor. Once you put it towards labor, you take away all those requirements. And we saw, like when we were buying the engines, transmissions for Henry, when we brought it to the board, we saw was about $750,000 over the life of the contract in savings, just by getting rid of all the federal clauses. So we can do something similar on any of those parts and put it as a replacement or rebuild program and capitalize it. The important part is using PSTA dollars versus federal dollars to do it. And that's
So-
where you get your savings.
So theoretically, the entire maintenance budget could be capitalized theoretically.
Not, well.
Or a good portion.
See, a good portion of it, but then you run into the policy issue that, our federal funds are based on a formula, they're basically flat, and they're not growing. And we've had a board, I don't know if the board adopted the policy, but a goal of not taking what could be used as capital dollars, of limiting the amount that we capitalize maintenance, to try to preserve our federal funds. for true capital, what we call true capital.
Right.
Not
So,
the maintenance.
Right now, in essence, have now been able to, by switching the funding sources, been able to get the dollar savings that we need regardless of where it sits on the books.
Right. But looking ahead, we're saying that for those midlife refurbs on the hybrids, we're gonna capitalize that. So that's gonna come with those federal strings.
No federal strings whatsoever, it's all our dollars doing
So it's gonna be our reserve dollars.
Yeah, to save us money.
And I think theoretically, we would do that with, on the diesel side as well.
We
We're gonna-
could.
we're gonna-
Good.
But right now, that's operating.
Right now, it's operating. Reason being is we're looking forward into the years going forward and where we've been for, as I mentioned, the last decade. The board as a whole,
Mhm.
notwithstanding any other
Right.
items, but
Right.
the board as a whole has voted
Yeah.
for hybrid buses.
Mhm.
So that's where we're going, and even as we go towards electric in the future, as you mentioned, or any other sources, we will always probably need something like a hybrid, BAE hybrid electric in there in case of emergencies, et cetera. And Henry's been working on some experimental stuff with the group. We would use the BAE electrics to be able to generate electricity for the electric buses in the case of an emergency. So we don't leave a bus out somewhere if the power grid goes down. So you're always going to want to have a little bit of diversified fleet. So, but that's why we were looking at it just with the hybrid, is that's the way the board has directed us to go in the future.
All right.
Is there a difference between the noise level, the riding comfort between the hybrid BAE and a new diesel technology? I mean, the old diesels were really noisy compared to the hybrids. Is there a quality of service to the rider between the new diesel versus the new BAE?
I know that the hybrid buses are a little quieter because it doesn't have that acceleration curve where, in order to move forward, it's a more gradual acceleration, so it is a little quieter. Also with the BAEs, the engine does shut off at intersections or major stops. There's another function of the BAE buses called depot mode, which means that the bus has the capability for a limited amount of time or distance to travel under all electric power. For example, pulling into Grand Central Station, the engine would shut off, the bus would still pull in, service it, however long it laid over, and when it left Grand Central, the engine would come on. So yes, it is off certain times.
Yeah.
Along those
Mr.
same
Schulman.
lines, is there a, do we have information as far as the pollution output for the different vehicles? Exhaust output?
I believe we compiled that data
you've done
last year.
Before, yeah.
Because one of the things, and I know Commissioner Eggers has mentioned in talking about the social aspect of it, our constituency is not just the people on the bus. It's the people sitting next to the bus, it's the people on the streets, it's the people in outdoor restaurants when the bus goes by. And so that
The
is
environmental
right.
component.
Yeah.
I use the social to mean outside as well as because it's not just affecting the world we live in; it's affecting the activities and the people that live in that world. So there's kind of a little bit of a two-pronged.
Well, we always looked at it as, I mean, in definitional terms, environmental covers that.
Right.
The social is more what we're doing for the riders themselves,
I-
and inviting more riders and that kind of, but I mean, I understand your point.
I understand. I just want to make sure that, because I think sometimes when people think of environmental, they don't always think about the personal impact on environmental. But
I got you.
that is also a component of, of these buses, is how we affect
Buses and
the quality of life for the people who are, many of these folks are paying through ad valorem taxes, they're paying for PSTA. They don't ride, but the value they get is also a cleaner environment. So that's an important component as well.
As is the social aspect. Traditionally, the way we've talked about it, most of those folks want more buses, more frequency of buses. They'd rather have that than less, and you can get more buses if you buy diesel.
And I understand
That's been the whole premise behind it.
And there's that balance between
On the
how many
capital
and
side.
what and where, and so, But we haven't talked about, and talking about rider comfort is important, but we haven't talked about what are the two different buses do to the world in which we live and the rest of our constituency that pays for PSTA.
That's why I keep asking for these pull-off spots, because it really, talking about the rest of the people that are out there that pay the taxes, and you get stuck behind those buses because you can't, because they stop in the middle of the road, and it's like, how many times, well, not everybody, I guess. I look ahead at those buses and say, I'm gonna make sure I get over right now, so I don't get stuck behind it. And you see a long line of cars that are sitting there.
Not happy.
Not happy, so, does that get a factor?
I think-
That has nothing to do with diesel versus.
It doesn't. That's road conditions. I think that's a different environment question.
All right, just to keep us on track here. All right, our decision today is with regard to the issue that is in 3D, okay, which is the replacement purchase. All the other things we've been talking about are something that we can talk about at another time that has nothing to do with this right now, correct? We'd have to modify, we would have to
18
modify
instead of
the purchase agreement if we added additional buses or did other things like that. Is that correct?
Right, I mean, we'll definitely look into those different options.
Mm-hmm.
Get back to you, I mean, we could take another, the board could approve the 18, and then we could, in a month, do more, or whatever.
2 more.
If it's possible.
And
Yeah.
2 or 3 more.
Maybe add it.
But I do think the issue that you brought up should be explored a little bit, just what do we do with that savings of the monies on the capital side? What can we do with that? It might be a little creative. Maybe we continue along that BAE route with our major purchase, but the additional savings that we're getting, maybe we try to get more of the bad buses off quicker, and that may be a way to go diesel or not. That's just a board decision policy-wise. Those are found dollars, so to speak, so I'd like to see that. Look into that a little bit.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, I was just gonna suggest, do you wanna do the 2 different motions? And that
Yeah,
sounds fine.
I think the first motion is, do we want to do 2 years in one, right? I mean, that's, I think.
I would second that.
Yeah, I'd move that for sure.
Second.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so we want to break it into 2 motions, is that what we're saying? Okay, all right, so the first motion then, could somebody phrase it?
Yeah, I just move that we do as staff has recommended and try to find some savings by purchasing not only 18s, but 19, 2 years
Mhm.
this year.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so that passes. Now, our second motion then is for the type of bus, or the 18 buses?
The
18
board's already
hybrid buses?
decided on the 18, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
yes.
So what we're talking about is making a recommendation for the type of buses on the 19, because they've really already decided on 18. And maybe there's a policy decision that says we're buying.
The board has approved a budget that has hybrid and electric in it going forward for
Right.
5 years.
For 5 years, okay. But that's just a plan, that's not.
Yeah, I mean, technically, this action is required because the spending authority that the board has authorized the CEO is only $100,000, and this is a $13 million purchase order with Gillig Bus Corporation out of Hayward, California, so the board has to approve that.
But let me get back to the
order
point
these
that you
buses.
just raised, which I think is a good one. I think that the plan, the 5-year plan is what you said, but every year we're making purchases.
Right, and the 18
Right.
has been
And I would
already
say
approved
that
for hybrid.
there can still be discussion about that on a year-to-year basis.
Well, there's,
Okay.
We're not committing to anything beyond 1 year. Now we're committing to 2 years.
is the question that we're talking about now to spend the savings from our 2-year budget for additional buses?
We haven't
I
talked.
don't think so.
No.
No, we can't do that.
We have,
We're just
Right.
buying the 18 buses.
that was what the first
Yeah.
motion was, but you mentioned 19, and that sort of.
Well, somebody else said 19. I wrote 18 down here.
Okay, so the first motion was for,
We're mixing bus quantity and fiscal year.
Year.
Yeah,
Okay.
maybe that's what we're doing.
18 buses, 18, 19 years.
okay,
All right.
so
So
what
what's
else
this-
do we want to talk
Yeah,
about?
so what is the second half then, of we split this up, what's the second half?
The second half would be, and now I can make a motion, move to approve the purchase of the 18 buses that, with this contract and the savings we've garnered through it.
How is that different than?
And that's what we just did, I think.
No, that was to do a 2-year.
2 years.
That we
Okay.
should do a 2-year agreement.
Okay.
Yes, we're doing a 2-year agreement. Now it's to approve this particular contract amount for those 2 years, which the board has already approved the purchase of the 9 and 9.
Okay.
We're just saying.
For these 35-foot BAE
BAE
series hybrid electric
Right.
buses, technical from Gillig.
Okay.
So the board said we approved 15-1, and we're approving a contract to 13.
And we're not going to address in this discussion what to do with that savings, other than it just goes into reserves at this point.
All right, do I hear a motion for the
Because
second?
we had
half?
talked about your thought.
I'll second the motion to Josh's motion.
Okay,
Which is.
So to approve the contract as it shows here.
okay.
I think it's wise that we go back and look at what we can do with that savings,
Right.
but that's not in this
That's not
contract.
this
That's not in this
That's not this
contract.
Okay.
motion.
Right.
And
All right,
I will
so,
support that.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to approve the contract.
To buy the BAEs, right?
To buy, okay.
Buy
18 buses.
18
BAEs, 35-foot BAE series hybrid electric buses.
Okay, all right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay,
Opposed?
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 Okay.
Only
So
because I'd
it's
like to see more balance.
3-2, okay.
Now,
All right,
do we
whoever's
want-
taking notes is 3-2 on that one.
Now,
Okay.
do we want to talk about spending the budget for more buses?
We could certainly make a recommendation to the board.
Or to recommend that the
Did it be looked
Staff.
at?
Mhm.
At least
Yeah, so-
looked at?
Yeah, we need to have a little bit more study.
Direct
on this,
staff
I
to-
think.
Yeah, I would like to
Look
see
at that.
staff come back and say, what can we do with that additional savings that the board's already approved? What buses can we buy, hybrid, diesel, whatever?
In
You know, show us
whatever year.
Exactly, show us what we can do with that so we can then lock in those savings.
And I'd like to see the pros and cons of doing that compared to rolling that money forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If we can add that in, Debbie?
We will.
Yeah, okay.
And can we include emissions when we, in the numbers, just in a comparative between the two?
just bring us back.
It is one of the metrics we should be looking at.
I mean, we don't have, the one thing we have produced that in the past, but again, it's all for new vehicles.
Mhm.
We don't have any kind of emissions testing.
No, and I
program
understand
To test
that.
these old buses.
But if we're looking at buying bus A versus bus B, one of this decision points should be emissions.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm not asking you to go back and run
Well,
tests
and I
on the
think
prior
that
fleet.
The same argument that you raised a second ago applies to this too, so that with that additional savings, you can get more, we don't know what they are, he just said, but we know that those old diesels are bad.
I'd be willing to accept the old diesel initial emission rating on a 2006. We can look up what it was versus
Right.
what is
We
what's
do-
actually.
We do have that.
Yeah.
So.
That would be, yeah, even though,
Those
and we know it would be a bigger
Right.
difference, but you're right, that would at least give you something,
Right.
yeah, as a relative number,
And I think it'd also help make the case to the board as a whole to say, okay, let's use those funds.
to get rid of some.
We're doing good in many different ways by doing that.
All right, and one other factor is, when do we want to set a time frame for when we want to talk about this further? Can we do this next month, or can we do it in a couple of months? I mean, how long would it take to accumulate the data that we're asking?
We can do it next, we can do it next month. The issue as just a caveat, it's a budgetary savings. It's not, right, it's compared to our budget. We're saving to what, it's not real. In the 5-year plans that you're looking at, it basically is just taking the $2.6 million is just coming from a future year.
At today's
It's not like,
cost.
it's not new money.
You mean we
Right.
got deposited?
No.
Well, to an extent, it's buying a current price rather than a future price.
Right.
Yeah,
So there's.
there's some real
but
savings.
There's. the
On your
cost
balance
of
sheet
money.
after next year, there will be $2.6 million more
Yes,
Right.
but.
if we
but
go this route.
when we are looking at the 5-year CIP,
It kind of disappears.
Right.
it's in there.
Well,
It's just-
and hopefully she'll come back maybe in that year and give us 2 more buy 2 more years
True.
worth, and we'll have more savings. I mean, you're talking about all these creative ways, and I think that's
That's
great.
one way of
You
saying
guys
it.
have done really great at trying to find creative ways to save money, so.
Okay. All right. In the interest of time,
We're done.
let's move along here. Okay, reports?
Well, I thought, we have a little bit of time, I think I could cover it.
Okay.
There's a couple of reports in your packet, the ridership report, the financial statements, which we're in the brand-new fiscal new year, and Debbie, show off your award.
Oh, yes. This
Oh,
is
cool.
for, we have yet again received the Certificate of Achievement and Excellence in Financial Reporting from GFOA.
Cool.
So that was for
Good.
2016.
Good, great job.
And we're in that little spot now where we're finishing up fiscal 17, starting fiscal 18, and I thought we were done with the budget, so.
I want to show at least my part of the PowerPoint on the ridership, since Commissioner Eggers and the Finance Committee talked about it and asked some of the questions about our ridership trends. But also in your packet is the list of a quarterly list of all contracts the PSTA has, ranked in order of value. And the folks over at Jolly Trolley should be having a big party because their new contract started and they are getting a lot more money under this new contract than they did under their old contract as of October 1. And now they are the second
Yes.
highest contract besides Care Ride. Care Ride is our highest value contract. Several PSTA staff was in Atlanta last week at the APTA annual conference and expo, where there was 12,000 transit professionals at the convention center with all these buses on display and all these companies that are listed on here. And Henry and Cassandra and I went around to all the different BAE and Gillig and all these different people, and I always felt like I kept running in. I didn't run into one of these people that we've given a contract to. I keep running into the people that we didn't give a contract to, and them complaining to me. It's like, I wish I had this list. Let me just. It's very frustrating.
Yeah, really. It can't be at those events.
Well, those of you who are also on the planning committee, I'll say this twice, but you might have questions. I know Mr. Jones has already, and Mr. Schulman have already seen this because they came to the track meeting last night.
It was exciting.
You have in your packet, at your places, the October, the first month of the fiscal year ridership. Or, I'm sorry, September. We're in October. September ridership. And that concludes the fiscal year. And as we had been projecting throughout the fiscal year, ridership is down. Ridership is down fairly substantially in the month of September due to Hurricane Irma, really, largely. So I've done some, what I'll describe as preliminary, since the fiscal year just ended. And I got this, the numbers right from that report. But for the for the fiscal year 2017 that just ended, PSTA's ridership was down 7.5%, just about a million trips, not riders, trips, less than 2016. And this, as we've been talking, is not just PSTA, but is virtually almost every transit system in the United States. Public transportation is down roughly about the same percentage. Now, of this million riders, at least 120,000 of those were directly related to Hurricane Irma. I think it probably was more than about maybe 150,000. We didn't run for 2 days at all. And then for the rest of that whole week following Hurricane Irma, it was pretty much a washout because the electricity was out to a majority of the county. Lots of the businesses, public schools were closed. we had low, even on the days we ran, we had relatively low ridership. Of course, we were busy doing evacuations and other services related to the emergency. So I tried to just do this analysis. I think Commissioner Eggers and others wanted to find out, like, well, we're all trying to find out, yes, we understand that these national trends are impacting us, the economy is improving, gas prices are at historic low levels, but what else is affecting our ridership? Lots of those things are not even in our control, but what is in our control that we can affect? So since I don't have a survey, I don't know exactly who is no longer riding us, or what trips are no longer being provided that were provided a year ago. I tried to figure out who is still riding us, and that's where these three middle areas. DART. DART is our service for people with disabilities. That's included in the ridership that you see. That's up 5%. So those folks are riding more. Transportation disadvantaged riders, which are included in the total, are up a lot from year to year. Probably due to advertising, more and more people are becoming aware. I think Commissioner Scott asked me, and I think it's true, there might have been some people, lots of these folks maybe were already riding and they just didn't know about the program and maybe learned about it when they went to the Pinellas County Health Department, or otherwise they found out that they qualified. Certainly there's some of that, but the low-income people that have no other option are still riding, and they're riding a lot more, many more trips on that. And the tourists are still riding. And I define tourists as just the routes that service the beach, the Suncoast Beach Trolley that goes up and down Gulf Boulevard, the Clearwater Jolly Trolley, not the aquarium service, but the service that just goes along the beach there, and the Central Avenue Trolley. Those three routes serve mainly tourist destinations, and so on those three routes, ridership is up, not down.
What about CMA? Is that in any of these numbers? The
It
CMA
is part of the ridership drop.
But in the column, it's part of the net other, is that right?
Right, it would be in the net. So that's another 100, I can't remember the exact number, but it's a substantial component. But you look at it, and then if you take those types of trips away, the ridership drop is even greater by other people besides those. Lots of the reason, and those would be in my sort of not kind of crude definition, discretionary riders. They have incomes that are more than transportation disadvantage or more than 150% of poverty. They maybe have choices. And in this modern era where gas prices are at historically low levels, the number of cars being purchased in Pinellas County is up. Uber and Lyft, they have other options. And they are riding public transit less than they were. So what are the things that we do have control over? One, we have control over the fares. And maybe our fares in this new era, where there's lots of other options, are maybe too high. And I want to quickly talk about that. And then what we're about to talk to the Planning Committee about is an effort over the next year to take another look at our service. We did this, we did a community bus plan back in 2012 and 13, and it's time, we have in our budget to do it again, to do a service redesign, and Cassandra's going to talk to the Planning Committee about that. But again, that is, and the concept that we're going to be pushing through that planning study is, should PSTA follow some of the other transit systems across the country that are actually seeing ridership increases and not decreases? There's only a few. And almost all of them have gone to a system where they are focusing their service on the core corridors of their community, of not necessarily running a whole bunch of low ridership inefficient neighborhood shuttles because of these new modes, but concentrating on high-frequency corridors where they can invest in the main corridors of the community with routes that come very frequent and can attract these discretionary riders. Regarding the fares, we did a little experiment in the month of June where we put the monthly bus pass of $70 on sale for $35, half price. And it was an incredible success. Instead of 432 monthly passes that were sold during the month of June 2016, we sold 3,315 monthly passes at half price.
We need to do that again. That was a good idea.
I agree. I mean,
Well,
we made $116,000 off the 3,000 passes at 35. We made 3 times as much money selling them at 35.
I mean, doing it one time isn't a trend, but I think we need to do it a few more times to see what the trend is.
I agree. Now, one question we had was, well, we did see that some people bought more than one pass, so they bought their July pass while the sale was going on, but not that many.
Kind of like
Not that many. When we look at July and August, they've gone back down to the 400 number. I mean, the number is low. It's only about 400 people. We do sell a lot more monthly passes, but almost all of those are an $11 TD. These are only the higher income folks. And there's just very few of them that are willing to pay $70 and commit to riding that often, on a monthly basis. But when we put it at 35, we got a lot more people to do that. So I agree. I think we should at least try to experiment a couple more times with this. Maybe look at some of our other passes, and then gosh, if it makes us more money and it gets more riders, that's a win-win. I can't see.
And Brad, I think you touched on it. I mean, I think the fact is when you do this kind of pricing sensitivity, it really lends itself to being defined as a commodity. That's what riding a bus is. It's a commodity product. And now we are starting to introduce the idea of some new premium services, which may be different.
Yeah.
But most of these are just commodity. This is not, and so when it's that sensitive, it's almost like that's what our pricing should be all the time. Find that spot that increases that kind of number. I mean, that just,
Yeah.
those are staggering numbers. And if you dropped it 30% or 33 instead of 50%, what would happen? Those are things that you find that sweet spot where we fill up these buses and drive our revenue numbers. That's gold. And that's really, I think it's recognizing what product we have right now, which is a commodity product. It's not specialty. So I think that's great information.
You just have to look at it, a lot of different factors. We sell a good number of our passes at CVS and Amscot and at retailers, and the discount didn't apply to them because they buy theirs. They basically get a commission for selling those for us, and they already bought them. So we couldn't give the discount there. So did a bunch of folks that normally buy their pass at CVS just go to the transit center and buy it there? We're trying to get some of that data, but they don't really know because they buy in bulk. They don't buy for one particular month. They might buy for like 4 months. And so more experimentation is definitely important there. The second issue was whether or not this concept that other transit systems have very effectively done, and for different reasons, Tampa, Hart is trying to do, where they're concentrating their service and increasing the frequency on high ridership corridors and eliminating or decreasing their service in other areas. Does that work? We did expand the service, not enormously, but we expanded it back in February of this past February, 2017. So we've got about 7 months of data. We only have a set number of buses, so almost all the expansions were on the weekends. And so I first looked at our ridership data by day, Now, this does not include our contracted services, Jolly Trolley and Looper, because they don't collect their data yet by day. But our regular PSTA buses, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, ridership was down, consistent with the overall trend, and on Saturday and Sunday, ridership was up. Now, only about 14, about a third of our routes got any kind of improvement. Most of the service did not see any improvement, but a few routes did, and the overall ridership on the entire system was up on the weekends. Now, this doesn't include September. I only have the ridership by route through August, and then plus September had Hurricane Irma hit on a weekend, and so the numbers probably are different once you factor in Irma. But in addition, we really focused on the expansion on 2 routes, one in North County and one in South County. One that goes to Countryside Mall, the 78, and one that is in South St. Pete and Gulfport. Those 2 routes, that we increased the span mainly, and a little bit of frequency improvement on the weekends, were up in total 5% and 11.4% on those 2 routes that we focused on. So this concept of increasing the frequency or span of our core routes concept, at least tentatively, was successful with this launch of new service in February. It does show perhaps an opportunity as we look at the whole network, or the whole system, to do the same thing.
The question I had is, if we expanded the service on Saturday and Sunday, what percent of the service cost was the increase? So, for instance, on the 14, did we invest 5% more in that service and got a 11% return? Or did we invest 20% more in that service and got an 11%?
I did not do that analysis, but that's a good question. We could try to figure that out.
And that graph there represents all of it. So those 2 particular routes, they have a similar graph that would show how those 2 routes did during the week as well.
Those 2 routes, in addition to getting improved frequency on the weekends, they both got extra service in the evening hours added to them on the weekdays too.
Right. So were they positive, or was it still kind of a loss during the week? On those
I did not look at those
2 routes.
on a day by day. I just looked at the total ridership from year to year since we expanded it, and the expansion generated additional riders,
And so
additional trips.
Those 2 were up for the whole week, essentially.
Yeah.
So good early returns on that expansion
Yeah.
that we talked about last year for the increase in millage. That I wanted to do pilot, and we didn't do it, but that's okay. This is a good thing. This is good. I wanted pilot because if it didn't work, then we could get rid of it or not continue it. But it worked. It seems to be preliminarily working well, so it's good. Excellent.
So I thought I would just present that to you. The other thing that I just wanted to highlight on the ridership report is questions that the Finance Committee had about. We had a system to try to explain the trend that the Finance Committee had a lot of really good questions, and it was kind of confusing. So this is a new format that you can take a look at and tell me what you think. So it takes the total ridership up or down compared to the previous year, and then shows on the left-hand side the portion of that ridership drop attributable to various things like Hurricane Irma, or not running on those days, or schools, Labor Day, Jolly Trolley, etc. And then it shows a percentage that equals 100% of the trend. So 22% of the drop was directly related to the 2 days we did not run because of Hurricane Irma. If that makes sense.
It's a big hit.
Yeah. And then another 20% was due to Pinellas County schools being closed for 7 days, which my kids thought was just awesome. Even though now they have to go back to school. So this is a different way that we put this together. I think it's maybe a little bit easier to understand.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Brad. It's good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, I was just waving at John.
One quick question is, if you read the newspaper on the park changes, looked, some of their riders out in the cold, and others were not as impacted. If we were to go to a similar arrangement where we pick more well-ridden routes and do less service or no service to poorer rider routes, we're picking and choosing winners and losers as far as where people are going to live, because if people who are riding the bus also are renters, they're going to move to where the bus routes run. Over time, it won't be immediate, but it'll be, at the end of their lease period, let's say, or things like that. So we're going to pick winners and losers as far as the neighborhoods or the regions of the cities that are involved in those kinds of route changes. So we have to consider the role of our bus service to be for everybody or for a larger but more concentrated demand area.
Yeah.
And that's an area that countywide, that's a relevant factor.
Yeah, and I think how we service them can vary too. I mean, I think some areas where maybe it's not prudent to continue a bus service, but we can maybe do more Lyft or Uber or,
Yeah.
I mean, we had some new options available to us that we didn't have in the past to service other areas.
Okay. So we're going to do further study on that.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you, everybody. I
Thank you, Mr.
apologize to our friends in the planning committee for taking longer than we thought, but we had a very robust discussion.
We did.
thank you guys for.
Thank you.
listening.
Thanks, Debbie.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that's correct or not.
Because it shows the increase in total expenditures, which means it's money going out.
Right.
So we're putting it somewhere.
Hey,
We're meeting. Sorry, Madam Chair. Personal one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, somehow we keep asking for sign-ons and things that it never asked for before. So I don't know if they did some kind of an upgrade or what.
Yeah, that would mean that they're.
now, the first thing to check is
600 million into reserves, so the total expenditure